Hey, how's it going, everybody? We want to welcome you all to another episode of the Kind of Boys podcast. As you can see, we have a full docket today and a full crew. We with the guests, and so I want to introduce myself real quick. My name is Everett Stevenson, joined with some of my other co-hosts.
Hey everybody, I'm one of the other co-hosts. I am Samantha Adams.
Hello, everybody. I'm another co-host. My name is Malik Foster, and I would like to introduce our guest here, Shantae. Would you like to say a little something?
Hey, everybody. It's just good to be back amongst like-minded and somewhat like-minded people.
So everybody, we do have a very interesting topic. The Supreme Court of the United States just ruled about the Roe v. Wade. They overturned that decision, that 1973 decision. So that's what we're going to be discussing today, and what that looks like for our country. So I know Everett, you might have a little something for us.
Absolutely. So just to give guys a little bit of an overview of everything, I know we've all been hearing, the Supreme Court has overturned Roe versus Wade. But as a little background information, in 1970, there was a case that was brought by a lady whose real name was Norma McCurvey. But for purposes of privacy, they named her as Jane Roe. Versus Henry Reid, who at the time was the district attorney of the state of he was the district attorney for Dallas County inside of Texas. And this was a federal action that was brought forth in which Mrs. Roe asserted that there is an absolute right to terminate pregnancy at any way at any time. And the courts then looked to see if they could find a way in order to preserve and balance the right of women's right to privacy, as well as the state's interest in regulating abortion. One of the things that the states and that the courts had determined was that there has to be a compelling state interest that justifies, regulating limited fundamental rights, such as the right to privacy. And that legislators would have to draw expressly expressly state why it is that the state needs to regulate women's right and women's right to an abortion. One of the things that the courts looked at was the health of the pregnant woman and also the potential of life of the fetus. Those were two factors that they considered when making a decision. And essentially what ended up coming with it, one of the decisions that was made was that women's health would allow to regulate abortions at approximately the end of the first trimester. So saying that, considering women's health, that they will allow women to abort children at approximately up until the time of the end of the first trimester. And in regards to the fetus, they were claiming that that an abortion would be allowed up until the point where the capability of meaningful life outside of the mother's womb would occur, which, was estimated to be around the 24-week 24-week period of the pregnancy. Since the 1973s, once the Supreme Court had made these decisions, there have been other cases that have been brought before the courts in regards to abortion and women's rights and privacy in this particular. One of the more notable ones was the 1992 case of Planned Parenthood of Southern Pennsylvania versus Casey, in which the Supreme Court established that restrictions on abortions are unconstitutional if they place an undue burden on women seeking an abortion before the fetus is viable. And then we also look at Gonzalez versus Carnhart, which was a 2007 case in which the courts upheld that the federal partial birth abortion ban, the act, which came in 2003, prohibited the abortion usage for dilation and evacuation. These are forms of abortions that were being called into question, and stated that those uses of abortions would be prohibited. There's also a case that came in 2016 which was the whole women's health versus Hellerstedt, in which the court invoked the decision in Casey to strike down two provisions of a Texas law requiring abortion clinics to meet the standards of ambulatory surgical centers and abortion doctors to have been admitted to have privileges at nearby hospitals. So essentially what that law looked to do was have abortion centers meet the standards that they would for surgical type of locations, as well as the doctors who will perform them to have rights and to perform operations in local hospitals as well. That one was also stricken down. More noticeably, in 2020, there was a case by June Medical Services LLC versus Rosso, in which the court invoked that whole women's health to declare unconstitutional a Louisiana statute in which there was a noticeable majority which claimed that the law was not required to, that the courts was not required to, again, have the surgical center requirements in order for the abortion clinic would not necessarily have to have a surgical center requirements as well. In 2021 of May, the Supreme Court agreed to review the October 21 terms of the lower court's decision to strike down a Mississippi state law adopted in 2018 that banned most abortions after the 15 weeks of pregnancy, which was a point that was well before the point of fetal viability. Okay, essentially litigators from Mississippi knew that this would be challenged, and they wanted to see this kind of go forth and go into the Supreme Court to see if they could cut down on the right to having an abortion prior to viability. Essentially, what ended up happening in this case was that the Mississippi lawmakers have made this measure in hopes that the legal challenge would make its way to the Supreme Court, where they knew that a conservative majority of justice would overturn and reduce the scope of their decisions. There was a case called Dobbs versus Jackson Women's Health Organization, which banned all pre-viability abortions as unconstitutional. In May of 2022, there was a draft of opinion about this case that was written by Justice Samuel Alito, and it was leaked, which was also political news due to the fact that it was an extraordinary breach of secrecy, which had never been seen before. We've never had a time in which we've seen Supreme Court opinions be leaked. And we'll talk about some of those effects here momentarily. But essentially, the opinion, which was dated in February of 2022, indicated that the court had overturned both Roe versus Wade and Planned Parenthood versus Casey, which was expected, as both Roe and Wade were overturned in the court's official decision in this month of, I think it was earlier this week as well, in June 2022. So here's a little opportunity for us to kind of give you a little breakdown on some of the ways that the courts have looked at abortion in the past, other cases that have come about from the courts, and just to give you an ideal understanding of where the premise of abortion rights and how it affected the fundamental rights of women's right to privacy came about, and as well as how the courts balance that against the state's right to the state's rights for public health and safety. All right, so that's what I have for a background.
Yeah, let me go ahead and jump in a little bit and add to some of the stuff that you said. And this is all like legal stuff that most people don't know, right? Now, when you look at our Constitution and the rights that we have, right? We look at our rights. We know we have the right to assemble, the right to freedom of religion, the right to bear arms. We know that those rights are outlined in the Constitution as amendments, right? But there are certain rights that are not outlined in the Constitution. And those are referred to, the legal term is called penumbra rights. And that stems from the 9th Amendment to the Constitution. And when you're talking about penumbra rights, right to privacy is a penumbra right. And it's not specifically stated as to what rights are fall under the right to privacy. However, there are 9, if I'm not mistaken, that fall within the right to privacy. They include, I'm not going to name them all, but they include things like abortion, contraceptions, how you raise your children, who lives in your household, sexual orientation, things like that. And so penumbra rights are rights that we all have. And I know when Justice Scalia was alive, he actually ruled about that right to privacy, which was actually very separate from what most conservative judges would have expected, especially when you're talking about the right to privacy and who you get to have in your house and who you have sex with and things like that. He actually separated from that, which was very interesting because he was probably the most conservative of the justices on the bench at the time. And he pretty much said that, who you have in your house and who you have in your bed is not the government's business. So when you're talking about things like that, and you're talking about things like healthcare and how you take care of yourself, that's what the HIPAA essentially is, a private right, right? So when we talk about the leak, now the leak that took place a couple months ago, as Everett stated, it was unprecedented. It never happened before. But it's interesting because you're talking about leaking something that's private about overturning an ability to have privacy. So, it's just very interesting that something like that happened where it's never happened before. The question is always, did it happen on purpose, right? Whatever happened to the person that leaked it? Things like that. I do know, if my memory serves me correctly, that we're looking to punish the person that leaked it. But how do you punish somebody for leaking something that's eventually going to become public, right? Because it did essentially become public a month and a half, 2 months later. So, I did want to make sure I added that so people understand the context of where abortion fell as a right, right? So I want to go ahead and give you guys an opportunity. I did touch on the leak a little bit, but I wanted to give Malik and Shantae also an opportunity to go ahead and add.
Yeah, so as far as the leak goes, since you mentioned that, yeah, you're right. It's kind of ironic that we're talking about privacy rights, and then there's a leak with the Supreme Court, one of the first reported leaks in the history of the Supreme Court founding. So obviously, there's people who are going to have their speculations about what happened, conspiracy theories like maybe it was an intentional leak to kind of gauge the country's pulse on the issue and see where they're at with it. That's definitely a possibility. I'm curious to know what will come out about with the investigation, see what happens when they actually investigate thoroughly to see what happened with that. So I'm curious about that. That's really all I wanted to say about the leaks, because the main point is the decision that was made. Everett gave a broad overview, background that about the abortions. He gave us a nice background about it. But that's really all I wanted to say about the leaks. You want to jump in, Shantae? You have anything you want to say about that?
Well, as it relates to the leak, my opinion is kind of just based on fact. I mean, we could dabble in the conspiracy theory of did they intentionally, whoever it was, release that information, regardless of if they intentionally did or not. They put us up on game because they basically prepared us for what was going to happen. So like when the leak happened in February, I was like, that is the quintessential ruling for women. Because, you know, I don't really want nobody telling me how to handle my body. And this ruling protected that. So you put whoever did it, regardless of the reason why, put us up on game. Like, hey, y'all, this about to happen. So I don't know. And I don't know if we heard, it was a little talk about the leak, but no one really talked about the leak. And it was a moment for us to be, okay, y'all, we need to start preparing. Like the rioting and stuff that's going on now probably should have been done in February. And it was to a certain extent, it did have a little something, but the impact that happened immediately when that ruling dropped June 24th, that type of energy would have been, it could have really moved something, back then. I mean, I say that, but I mean, when people's minds are set, then there's that. And the fact that this is how we have gotten encompassed and just ingrained in the political warfare. This is just a casualty in a political warfare. Now, that is my opinion. That's not a conspiracy theory. It's also not based in it. It's based in factual events. My opinion is based on factual events. But as it relates to the leak, I appreciate the leak. The leak put us up on game prior to. So yeah, that's my opinion of the leak.
One of the things that I was thinking about with the leak was, and it was one of the reasons why I kind of argue with my classmates, my peers here on the pod, was I was like, guys, we gotta wait before we discuss this. Like, I pushed for it because I felt like we needed to see what this leak was going to do in regards to, would this leak be something that would sway the judges, even though we know that as a Supreme Court justice, you're not technically have this right to move and live unfazed by others. You're supposed to be, not worried about what public opinion would bring about. You're just supposed to make the decision that you think is best for the country. And one of the things that I would look to see was, well, would this leak actually have an effect on the justices? Would they, then in turn look to see like, okay, hey, do we need to, maybe look at this a little differently? We see what the country is, we see how some individuals in the country are reacting to this news. We hear some of the outcries from women and other individuals in this country as well, and other advocates for women's rights. Would that be enough for them to maybe go back and reconsider it when it was time for them to make this decision? And as we found out, like Sanjay said a few days ago, that no, it was not. And they were able to kind of stay unbiased by the public opinion, which is something that, like, we've all been seeing. She mentioned as well how we've been seeing different protests. I think Malik showed us a picture. There's some people who were protesting in the streets of Arizona. There were people who were protesting in the streets, I believe, in California as well. And we've seen some different responses from different states as well. And one of the things that I also wanted to reference in talking about the decision that came through, but in just talking about public opinion, and I guess if you guys have any opinions on this as well, you guys can more than welcome to join in on it. But was that it was interesting to see the outrage that originally had happened in February, where we seen it on talk shows. We seen it, everybody was talking about it, to the point to, like you said, we haven't even addressed that leak in itself, to the fact of how the leak occurred, who leaked it, you know what I'm saying? Are there going to be consequences from that? And that's like a whole subsection to the fact that we were just more so outraged at the actual law that was being passed. So I definitely think public opinion was big, but I think it wasn't enough per se to really make the justices make any changes. And I think that kind of changed when we look into talking about which is something that we're going to talk about, which are some of the responses that different people have taken. But I know we had additionally the SCOTUS judgment on board as well that we wanted to talk about. So I don't know if anyone wants to jump into that, or if you guys have some more thoughts on my public opinion.
Yeah, I don't think that the purpose of the leak was to make the justices do anything. That's one of the reasons why, I was pushing to actually talk about it. I think the purpose of the leak was to make the legislators in our legislature to do something about it. I think it was to put them on notice, like, hey, this is coming down the pike. Now is the time to go make a law to codify protecting women's rights as it relates to abortion. And they didn't do nothing. They just got real mad, talked about it, and went on about their business. And I think
I agree with that 100%.
That's what's one of the most frustrating things about the leak, right? Because it was like this person put everything on the line to try to protect women's rights, and they didn't do anything with it. Hey, Bruno, that's our unofficial other co-host, Bruno, back there, whatever. Yeah, and so I think that right there is another part of the issue. When you're talking about public opinion, people are pissed. Some people are very happy. They're excited. They're rejoicing. A lot of pro-lifers are very happy. You have a lot of even Congress people out here showing their true colors with their mask off, talking about hey, let's do Board of Education and Plessy versus Ferguson next. But ain't nobody saying nothing about Loving v. Virginia. I'm just saying. And so let's just be clear. Let me make sure I'm clear about what those cases are for our viewers that don't know. Plessy versus Ferguson is separate but equal, even though things they were separate. That's desegregation. When you're talking about Board of Education versus Board of Education, that is desegregating schools. Okay. When you're talking about Loving versus Virginia, that is that's the right to marry somebody of the opposite. I mean, a Black person, white people being able to get married. Clarence Thomas, the one who wrote the concurring decision, has actually stated in his concurring opinion that, other rights are in jeopardy now, such as contraception and gay marriage rights. All of those fall within under those penumbra rights under the 9th Amendment. So, when you're talking about what's going on here, people are absolutely pissed. It's fine to have opposing views, right? That's why we're counterpoise. We don't always agree on things, and that's perfectly fine. I think that having opposing views helps us to grow. But when you start to effectuate things that can have an impact on how people care for themselves, I think that's a different type of a discussion. And I think that what's happening here with the overturning of Roe versus Wade and Planned Parenthood versus Casey is definitely having that type of impact. And it makes you almost feel like you don't have a choice but to look back to 50 years ago, prior to Roe versus Wade and prior to Casey versus Planned Parenthood versus Casey, to see what was life like back then, especially for women, because they're the ones, we are the ones that are most impacted by it. So, I think that it's important to definitely take a look at that and recognize what did that look like then, and what do we expect that to look like now?
To speak to that, Sam, we know that the vote was 5-4. We're not going to speak to 3 of the 5 being appointed by the past president. What struck me is one of the 5 was a woman. How, Sway?
Well, because there are women that are pro-life.
And you're right. But I guess my way of thinking is anything can happen. We can have children up until we complete menopause. We could be going through menopause and still get pregnant. My sister had to tell a 57-year-old woman she was pregnant. That hit different.
Right.
At 57, giving birth could cause real problems. So now we don't know what's in her future. I pray that she remains safe, but we don't know what's in her future. But because of the decision she helped make, she could be damning herself and not even know it, because we are so engulfed in supporting political views and political positions to where we're not even seeing clearly anymore. Like when we went to school, the first thing they told us was the big picture. Look at the big picture, not what's right in front of you. The big picture encompasses what you stated before, Sam. Clarence Thomas saying he wants to reconsider same-sex marriage and contraceptives. So you're making decisions about things that have nothing to do with you. It has nothing to do with your household. It doesn't feed you at night. It doesn't kiss your children to sleep at night. It has nothing to do with the betterment of you. And you're making decisions about somebody else's life. That's big. That is really big, because there's so many issues. I'm pretty certain my mama wouldn't want me to talk about this, but I'm going to talk about this. When my mama was 13, she was walking through a park on her way home from school, and 5 boys jumped her and tried to rape her. Her childhood friend across the street was the only reason she was not raped. What if my mom got pregnant out of that?
Right. Right. And
then what if the birth of the baby looks like one of the assailants? And then what if she's forced to keep that child? She has to look at the face. And then what if the child end up looking like one of them? You got to look at your assailant. And then you don't know what that person brings as far as sicknesses and his blood, that person's bloodline. This is a rabbit hole that it's a rabbit hole of effects that people don't consider. It can go in a way that we didn't even think about with other rights. And then if we just look at the premise of Roe versus Wade, it itself takes a lot of rabbit hole dives, and it just wasn't considered. But what was considered was political gain and political power. This was a political front.
Yeah. Right before I let Malik say what he has to say, because I know he wants to speak, I just want to remind people that these laws affect real people. People are not figments. It's like not a movie. People are not characters in a film. These are real, actual, individual people, like you and me. Yeah, we oftentimes look at people who may be public figures or influencers or whatever, and look at them with a certain level of there's a certain amount of space in between them and you, because the realities of your lives are different, or of our lives are different. But the truth is, we're real human beings. We live and breathe the same air. We got to get up every day. We get dressed one foot in our pants. We step out of bed one leg at a time. We are people, and we have families, people that care about us. We do what we got to do to survive and things like that. And I think that a lot of times, especially when you're talking about politics and law, that gets forgotten. Is that we're talking about real, actual human beings, not just some figments. So I just wanted to make sure I put that out there, because when we're talking about public opinion, we're talking about the judge. We're talking about all of this. We're talking about actual humans, actual people. So I just wanted to make sure I put that out there. Go ahead, Malik.
Yeah. So Shantae, Sam, you said a lot. Y'all guys said a lot. So one interesting point is how other women think that how can other women agree to the overturning of Roe v. Wade, right? Or pro-life, right? Well, we could look at evidence of a lot of women have conservative views, right? Especially if they're married to a conservative husband. They tend to align with and vote with that conservative husband. So if a conservative man is married to a conservative wife, she's most likely going to vote his way and have similar ideology to him. And I think that goes for most people who have spouses, right? They tend to have a similar way of thinking on a multitude of issues, or even if there are differences, they tend to agree when it comes to, that decision making of what's best for their family, or what they think is best for their household, right? Even if they may, I don't know if my husband's totally right on this issue, but I'm gonna still, support him and go with his decision, right? So people may disagree with that way of thinking by women. Some women may disagree with that way of thinking, but hey, it is what it is. And we saw evidence of that when Trump got elected over Hillary Clinton, right? There's a lot of women that voted for Trump over a woman, Hillary Clinton, right? So it's not just the mere fact that you're a woman is enough for you to get that women vote or get that women support, or just because of it, if it's primarily a women issue, it's not enough to have other women support you just because it's a women issue, right? So that's the main point I wanted to make out of that. And then another thing is the decision about someone's life, right? People mentioned everybody's up in arms about decision about somebody's life, but I kind of want to go a little bit back into the Casey versus Anthony, not Casey versus Anthony, the Roe v. Wade decision, excuse me. One thing that I noticed, which is very interesting, that people don't really have qualms about, which isn't truly fair, in my opinion, is when they made that decision that the choice to end a pregnancy in the first trimester is solely up to a woman, right? So when you hear that language, is that does that sound fair? Because when I think about it, in order to create that situation where you even have to have an abortion, a man and woman have to have consensual sexual intercourse, or it's rape, which is a crime, right? So if a man doesn't get that consent, he's committing a crime. However, a woman, as a product of that consensual sex, she doesn't have to get the consent of a man. So I'm just throwing my little view out there. I think that portion of that decision was incorrect. I don't think that was an appropriate decision, because you have to get consent to have the sex, but in order to abort the product, the result, not the product, excuse me, the result of the action of the sexual intercourse, a woman could make that unilateral decision on her own just because she carries the child, right? Which I don't think is fair or equal, because if the roles were reversed, I think we can all agree that it wouldn't be fair. But due to the historical ideology of this country and the rise of feminism, I think they kind of push that back on us, saying it's not fair, women have been mistreated, our rights. So it's okay to, dwindle men's rights, to restrict men's rights, for lack of a better word. So I wanted to put that out there, but I want y'all to kind of chime in. I just wanted to throw that out there. I don't want to talk too long because I could keep going.
Yes, let me just say this. There are different types of pregnancies, right? You have a full healthy pregnancy. Then you have other types of pregnancies, such as ectopic pregnancy, and you have other pregnancies. There's just different types. Abortion is actually the only way that you have septic uterus, you have things like that. And abortion is actually the only way that you can clear those if the body doesn't expel it on its own, right? Back in the day, after Roe v. Wade, but before Casey versus Planned Parenthood, women actually had to get permission from their husbands in order to get an abortion. If a man did not believe that she should get an abortion, she had to have the baby. She had to put her life in jeopardy, had to put her body in jeopardy. She didn't have a say-so over what happened inside of her body. She had no say-so. She didn't want to get pregnant, especially too back in those days, a husband could rape his wife and not be prosecuted for it. So the public policy, some of the public policy reasons for making that determination when that case law, had been solidified. I'm not going to say codified because it wasn't. Is in order to protect women in that sense and in that essence. Because if a woman has an ectopic pregnancy and her husband doesn't believe her or doesn't believe in it, that puts that woman's life in jeopardy. She will die. Not if, not might.
She will.
She will absolutely die. And so when you're talking about leaving up to some of the states, up to the states, some of these states have not created an exception that allows for that, right? So they might say for the health of the mother. Nobody's also, when you talk about health, you're only saying the physical health. Nobody's talking about the mental health of the mother, because pregnancy does a number on your mental health. When you're talking about what the hormones, the inconsistent level of hormones that are flowing through your body because you're carrying another child, the postpartum depression that happens after having a baby, all of these things all go to the health of a woman. And if a woman is not willing to do that, she's still being forced, because when you talk about the health of a woman or the health of the mother, mental health is never considered. It's always only physical health. So, I get what you're saying, Malik, as far as if a man wants to have a baby and a woman doesn't, it's her sole decision. But most of the time, when people get pregnant, they make that decision together, most of the time. You know what I'm saying? It does happen where it's not a decision where both of them make that decision together, but a majority of the time it is.
Because if don't, it's a crime.
Well, yeah, but at the same, it's you're talking about in terms of rape. I'm talking about in terms of a woman not terminating a pregnancy when a man doesn't want to have the child. You see what I'm saying? And I think that there's other things that they could have done rather than literally unilaterally taking away the entire right of a woman to do what she wants with her body.
Well, right? I just pointed that out because I just think that's just totally unfair.
Let me speak to that. I want to speak to that particular position that you have about, about it not being unfair. Well, this may be, I'm going to try to keep this PG-13, but we all know the anatomy of the body and what it takes to make a baby, what is needed from a man and what is needed from a woman to actually conceive. That's where your job stops. Our job is just starting. Our job, it takes another form. So you don't, and this is what women mean when we say you don't have to carry the child. What happens during pregnancy, what happens after pregnancy, like Sam talked about the postpartum. You don't know what it feels like to have postpartum depression, because postpartum means to actually be pregnant. You don't know what it feels like to be pregnant. So what comes along with pregnancy? Toxemia. You don't ever have to experience toxemia. You don't ever have to experience gestational diabetes. You don't ever have to experience labor pains, contractions, stretch marks in areas that you didn't have before. I know that seems, for a lot of people, they will say, well, that's just the physical. Well, the physical can attack your mental. And then you start, the mental, that's when you tie into one area you can tie into the woman's mental health, where her body goes through a complete metamorphosis. My mother and sister have both delivered multiple times, and they have both said they are not physically the same prior to, because you don't go back to wherever you were prior to having a child. So that's speaking to, I think, why we go through a whole lot more than y'all. So yeah, we do get to say on what happens in our bodies. It's my body. You know, if you want to have a say, then science is growing greatly. Maybe dabble and put your funds behind how a man can carry a child. But until then, if I have to carry it in my body, and it can go even deeper, segue into just the female reproductive system. January 12th, I had my first surgery ever in all 40 years of my years living. And it was a major surgery. It was a myomectomy. They found very large tumors on my uterus. Just so happened that they could remove the tumors. But a lot of women don't realize that they have tumors, and it's very prevalent in Black women. Roe v. Wade is going to affect this in a lot of Black women. We don't always know we have these fibroid issues until pregnancy happens. So it has been the situation where women have got to choose between delivering the baby and living. And if they have this child, because really what they need is a hysterectomy and a full hysterectomy. And a full hysterectomy takes out all the workshop. So you either have the baby or take out all the workshop. Well, when we're taking out all the workshop, it will terminate the child's life. So now, and what if that happened through rape? Because you mentioned rape. It's either through the will or the force. What if it happens through rape? Something that I didn't ask. And because when it rains, it pours. Those are things to consider. Right to contraception. Men don't even ever speak of vasectomies. What do you think a vasectomy is? So that does affect you. This affects you. Because Clarence Thomas is talking about reconsidering that too. Because when we say right to contraception, we only think about the woman. Y'all ain't never thought about vasectomy with that. What is the purpose of getting a vasectomy? So you will not be able to reproduce anymore.
Right. And women have their own version of a vasectomy. I know many people, they can get their tubes tied, but the argument is,
that's not a vasectomy.
It's not the same, Malik, because vasectomies are reversible and getting your tubes tied is not.
But okay, they're not the same exact thing, but very similar in the fact that they serve the same function, which is to prevent reproduction.
No, I understand what you're saying, Malik, but
is that not true?
It's not, because you have the choice to change it. Hold on, let me
ask this, and then I'll let you have this question. So when a woman gets her tubes tied, what is the purpose of that?
There are many purposes.
There's so many purposes.
Right. It doesn't necessarily solely have to be to prevent reproduction, right? There could be other problems going on within her body. If she has a blood disorder, if she has there's a litany of reasons. You see what I'm saying? Because if a woman, let's take somebody who has sickle cell. Okay. You have a Black woman, she's got sickle cell anemia. It's not that she cannot get pregnant, because she absolutely can, but she should not, because it could kill her. That's one of the reasons why women may get, their tubes tied. But when you're talking about what happens with a woman, right, surgically, it's permanent. Whereas what happens with the man surgically, it's not permanent. So when women have to make these decisions, they literally have to think about whether or not they're willing to live the rest of their lives with this. But, with men, they can also make the decision to go back and change it around. So, is there a higher risk? Yes, for men when they get a vasectomy as to whether or not it'll go back the way that it was before. But with women, it's not reversible. So when you're talking about things like contraception and things like, finding alternate ways to avoid having a baby as opposed to abortion, you have to recognize when a woman has to make those decisions, they're permanent. Men have a luxury of being able to make decisions that are more temporary. And so that right there is why Shantae and I are saying that it's not the same.
Okay, but let me say this. I think, and then I'll let you kind of chime in here. I think that, some of the things that you and Shantae said is basically you guys are saying that because men's anatomy and bodies are different from women, our rights need to be restricted because you guys' sexual anatomy is different from ours. Because basically you're saying, Shantae said something very interesting. If we want to say we should have to change our whole biological bodies if we want to have a say, even though that when a woman's pregnant, it's not like she did it on her own. It's still our DNA that's there. So she shouldn't be able to make I think there's an argument to be had that a woman shouldn't be able to make a unilateral decision on that because, yeah, it's her body, but it's not just her DNA there. She had another man to assist her with that. So, making a unilateral decision with a man and hers DNA without the consent of the man as well. And that's not fair. We're talking about equal, this country promotes equal rights and feminism is all about equality, but we're kind of going backwards, right? We're saying, hey, women should have more rights and men's rights should be restricted.
That's not what's being said at all.
The abortion situation, like women should be able to do whatever they want, no matter what, even though there's another party involved here, which is the man, which I think, no one looks at. Like, what does the man think? Like, who cares? The child's not inside their body, so they shouldn't get any type of rights. And that's the kind of thinking that is very common and prevalent.
No, that's not anybody's thinking.
People who have some issues with it. I mean, it seems to me that's not.
I think that's your misinterpretation of.
I don't think I'm misinterpreting it.
You are, because the thing about it is, nobody is saying that a man's position in having a baby is irrelevant. Period. At any stage of a pregnancy. Okay. Nobody is saying that. Nobody is saying that it's only a woman's decision. Nobody's saying that either. As a matter of fact, Shantae didn't say that. What she said was, and maybe I can say it differently, or maybe you hear it differently from me, I don't know. But what she said was, a woman goes through all kinds of changes in her own body when she's pregnant. Okay. DNA, whose DNA go aside? She could be a friggin' surrogate. Okay. Let's just take a surrogate. You got somebody else's egg and somebody else's sperm. That body is still going to go through those changes. Okay. And what Shantae is saying is, if it's that serious, right? If it's that serious and a man feels as though that woman's right to choose what happens inside of her body is not important, or she shouldn't have the ability to make a decision as to what happens inside of her own body, there's enough science and technology out there for him to figure out how to do it on his own. And that's what she's saying. She's not saying that the right of a man should be taken away. She's saying that because what women have to go through, she's making a choice about her own body. It's not necessarily about the baby. And I think that right there in part is part of the issue. You see what I'm saying? A lot of times when people are talking about abortion, you, Malik, are not doing that, right? You're not talking about the baby itself. You're talking about the man's right to choose, essentially, right? And nobody's saying that a man should not have a right to choose. We actually, are saying that they should. But It's what is happening in that woman's body and what right is being taken away. That includes going further down the line when you're talking about contraception, which was a part of the opinion that was given by Justice Thomas. It's the men don't want the government regulating what happens in their body, trying to make it seem like it's about babies, right? When that's not what it is. It's not about babies at all. That's what people would like us to believe. That's just like when we talk about it all the time, how they're like, oh, Black people, well, we ended slavery. Y'all should be good with that, right? Or, hey, here's a statue. It's like this diversion for what's really going on, right? And it's the government telling women what to do with their bodies is not okay, just like the government should not be telling a man what to do with his body. And that right there, I think, is what she's trying to say. And I believe that that's the feminist point of view as well. It's not about, oh, well, screw you because you're some man. That's not it. It's, this is my body and I get to do what I want to do with my body. Now, another life form may be growing that may come from somebody else's DNA, right? And so that's a different conversation. That's hey, let's figure out how to tweak this so that men have more of a say-so as it relates to what happens with the life form inside of that woman's body, but not with the woman's body itself. And that right there, I think, is the difference. I think that we're talking about two separate things. They're related, but they're not even distant cousins. They're brother and sister or sister, or whatever you want to call it. They're siblings, but they're not this exact same thing. You see what I'm saying? They all relate to the same exact judgment made by the Supreme Court, though, right? Because when you talk about getting rid of Roe v. Wade, right, you're talking about getting rid of a woman's right to choose what to do with her body and getting rid of a man's right to choose as to whether or not he wants a life form to grow inside of her body.
I gotta stop you there because that's where I agree with Malik. Men never had a right in this conversation. This is all about women's right.
I said say so.
You know what I'm saying? They don't even have a say so. After conception, buddy, it's over for you. Whatever she decided to do for her health, it's on. Yes, it is, Sam. It's over for you, brother. Once you get her pregnant, it's her sole decision to make. So this does not have a conversation about what men's rights are once she conceived. It is the woman's decision and the woman's decision.
That is not true, because remember, like I said earlier, most pregnancies happen because a man and a woman had a conversation about it and they agreed to it.
Right? Correct. And what I'm saying.
So with that being, hold on, let me finish. So with that being said, right, if you have a man and a woman having a conversation and they're agreeing to having a baby, right, even though it's the woman's decision, she's the one that got to go in and sign the paperwork. She's the one that has to have all of this stuff happen to her body. She's the one that's getting poked and prodded on. She's the one that's putting her life in jeopardy for having a baby. It was a decision that she made with a man most of the time, not all of the time, right? And when I say not all of the time, that's not only rape. That also includes when women go out and have babies and men don't want them, okay? That includes both of those, right? But a majority of the time, even though the woman is the one that's going in and signing that paperwork, both of them are going in on this thing together. And they're both making those decisions and they're both making those choices. And she's going in knowing that he is participating in that decision-making process, despite the fact
that's where I'm gonna have to interject again. They may be going in on a decision-making to conceive a baby, but after the conception has occurred, that's when we are now looking at this as we've been saying, this is a women's right issue because of the fact that you guys have just stated. It's my body that has to go through these issues. You can't say as a man, now there may have been a time back in the day where there was a statement that women may have had to have the agreement of their husbands in order to have an abortion, but that is not today's time. So when we look at this issue, that's why I argue that no, this is a woman's right issue solely, because at the end of the day, like Malik was arguing, that once that conception occurs, whatever that woman decides to do with her body and what's inside of her body is that woman's choice. And so that's why I'm saying that, you know, this is a woman's issue, because even if she has, say, health issues that prevent her, as a man, you can't force her to have that baby. You know what I'm saying? Even if she doesn't have health issues that occur.
But even if you could, Roe v. Wade is taking that away from y'all.
That's what I'm saying. That is the thing.
But it wasn't that away from y'all for us at any point.
No, but see, the point.
Well, what Sam is saying is it's a trickle down effect. The overturning of Roe v. Wade, even if men wanted to fight for that right, that particular right, that would be a men's rights platform. This overturning takes that away from y'all.
But Shantae,
which I also will argue one last little thing real quick before I jump right back into what we were talking about, which was this also can be something that can be skewed in the sense of in the way that it could go is again, I hear it. You know, it's taking away the right to the abortion thing, flat out, point blank. Neither one of y'all will be able to have the conversation.
Right.
Okay, cool. But we also got to remember too, I'm saying let's not include for health reasons from a woman. If she do decide to have that baby, she still can get that baby up for adoption. She can get that baby up for firefighter thing.
Itself is a thing too, though, E. So now think about this. Our demographic is the demographic that if we have the children, they're more than likely going to be put in the system or on some type of public service. And then that is going to then hit the pockets, and it's going to be a tax thing. It's going to be a whole, I pay my taxes, and the whole welfare conversation, the whole child support conversation is going to come up. Then we're going to be accused of overpopulating the country. This is a trickle down effect. We can control the population by making better decisions for us.
But okay, I like that, Shantae. So why can't we make better decisions before pregnancy?
Wait, say that again, Malik, because I feel like I heard you, and I want to make sure I heard you.
Why can't we just make better decisions before pregnancy?
I'm gonna let you answer this question.
Well, Malik, let me ask you this. Now,
and I also want to say that I'm gonna answer that.
Let Shantae go.
Hold on, let E talk, because
Shantae can go, because I'm gonna answer the question, because I think my answer will go back into what I want to go into the agenda. So
okay, I just wanted to say this quick statement, because we all know when it comes to health in this modern day of medicine, right? Prevention is better than if you actually get something, right? So that's in most cases. In this case, if we can prevent the pregnancy, unwanted pregnancy, because if you're trying to get an abortion, that's an unwanted pregnancy, generally speaking, unless there's other complications. But generally, if your health is in order and everything else, there was no crime committed against you, and you had consensual sex, and you got pregnant, and you want an abortion, that's unwanted. So you should be able to be a responsible adult and use contraceptives, and or be less promiscuous or be abstinent. There's still options available prior to, right? So a woman,
hold on. Did you really just attack sexual?
I'm gonna let you answer the question. That's why I threw my head back. I knew you was gonna say this. Go ahead.
Yeah.
I'll let you have it.
But that doesn't. So basically, what I'm saying is, a woman can be more sexually responsible, and I know.
Oh my God, Malik.
And a man can be sexually responsible too. But
okay.
They're both irresponsible.
Okay.
And they both don't want the baby, or one person doesn't give one person the unilateral right to make that decision on their own. That's basically
okay. I'm going to respond like a lawyer, and then I'm going to respond like a Shantae. The lawyer is going to tell you. The lawyer is going to tell you that the right to contraception, being more responsible, to your point, Should people being more responsible? That in and of itself is next on the chopping block. Again, I tie you right back to Clarence Thomas. He told y'all that he said
that, but it's not on the chopping block right now.
Hold on, let it.
Did Sugarfoot say it? He said he wants SCOTUS to reconsider decisions on gay marriage and contraceptives. So being more responsible would in fact tie into contraceptives. That was the lawyer version. Let me talk to you from Tay-Tay. Under no circumstances should any of us ever police or have any opinion about any particular person, male or female, sexual freedom, especially. And now this is getting off topic and a rabbit hole, if there is ever one. Somebody being sexually free with themselves, that ain't got nothing to do with the price of tea in China. Sex is just the avenue to create.
Yeah, but you got to deal with the consequences.
That is, I mean, who cares how I change my tire? Did the tire get changed? Who cares? However it happens, it happens. That in and of itself, I could be real Shantae about that one, Malik, but I do want us to stay on topic. That is far off. Sexual freedom, that's literally, why is a woman called a hoe and a man ain't? That is a whole thing, and we'll have that conversation later. But as it relates to contraceptions and being more responsible, that is up next. That's up on the chopping block. And that's the thing that we're saying when Roe v. Wade overturning, there's a bigger picture involved. There are other rights that Sam spoke about in depthly that are on the chopping block now. Contraception. Go ahead, E.
Okay, my bad. You're right, because you said that Justice Thomas wrote that in his opinion, speaking about looking into same-sex marriages and as well as looking into contraceptions. Now, if it plays out like how this has played out, what we likely will see is some southern state make some type of ruling against this, and then it will get challenged, and then it will get brought before the courts. It was almost like a whistle call, if you will, to those legislators in those states to say, hey, give me something to go against these things. So we can table that one real quick until that comes down the line. But what I do want to say, though, is to both of y'all point, one of the way in which you can be more responsible in regards to how you're being promiscuous or whatever, your sexual freedoms, is to be looking at, again, what we saw from the Congress's decision, which was stating that we're going to leave it ultimately to the states to decide. So that's what SCOTUS came down with their decision of saying. So when we look at that, we have to look at some of the things that also transpire from that. We have some states say straight up, we're canceling every abortion that we have coming from this point on. And then we had other states say something as far as, we'll be a safe haven. If you want to come here, we're going to allow for abortions to remain. And we're also going to allow for people, we're not going to help prosecute other states or help people be prosecuted for coming to our state and having abortions. So be that as it may, it didn't kill abortion to its face. And what it did was allow for states to now impose whatever rights that they feel that their constituents in their state would like to do. So if you want to be factually free, my thing would be move to California, move to another state in which they're telling you that it's okay and we got your back. Otherwise, if you in some of these southern states that are telling you flat out, if you get caught or you get caught lacking out here, we are not helping you in that situation, or we're not giving you an opinion, that's when you're going to have to look at yourself and say, dang, I made a mistake. I'm in the wrong state to be doing these type of actions if I want to move in this type of direction. And or, as we've seen too, because we saw as well, not only did the states get involved, we saw public businesses get involved in stating that they would help with allowing some of their citizens to, or employees to receive funding to go to different places to what was it like? I think we saw like Netflix.
Netflix and Disney. They said they're going to
sporting goods. There's a bunch of them.
Said they'll pay for their employees' travel expenses, tuition costs, which I think is not the right decision. But
hold on, wait. Can I say Something, please.
Go ahead. I just wanted to.
I don't know why you think that, because you just don't care about people sometimes. I swear, Malik.
I do care
swear.
about
Somebody has a medical. Hold on. Somebody has a medical condition and needs an abortion.
Let me respond.
Hold on. Let me speak. If somebody has a medical condition and needs an abortion and needs to go someplace else to get it, and their job is willing to send them, you're saying you don't think that that's a good idea. But that's your opinion. You're entitled to it. I don't agree wholeheartedly. But one of the things,
but it don't even have to be medical though. That was just saying, period.
Hold on. One of the things I wanted to say to push back on E. Why does everybody seem to think that everybody got all this money to travel to other places to get it?
People
I don't know why people think that. First of all, one of the main reasons why people get an abortion is because they can't afford to have a kid. Most of these people live in an area, they've never left their block radius because they don't have money. Okay, money is a huge issue. First of all, it's expensive as hell to travel, even for people like you and I, right? Then on top of that, you know, especially when you find out that you're pregnant, right?
Yeah.
You can get even sicker on the plane, right? Let's also make sure because of the body and what happens when you hit them altitudes. Also, right? People don't have money. We don't know how much it costs in another state. People do not have money to just hop on a flight. Oh, I'm going to go get an abortion in California, or move to one of the most expensive states in the damn country. So it's like, you know, I don't know why everybody seems to think that people have all this money when most of the people that are going to be affected the most by the overturning of Roe v. Wade is poor people, Black people, people of color. We are the ones that are going to be affected the most by it. You know, and so when I talk about, I'm going to kind of switch gears a little bit. When we're talking about, it's left up to the states, great. Okay, if you live in a state, if you're poor and you live in a state where they're going to, you know, hold it down and write executive orders to keep to keep abortion legal in that state, that's great. But if you live in a state where a total ban is been effectuated and you're going to be criminalized for getting an abortion, right? You're going to be criminal, potentially go to jail for doing what you wanted to do with your own health, right? If you don't really have a choice. There's no choice in that. Well, let me rephrase that. There is a choice. The choice is at that point, because things happen, you can go ahead and break the law, you can go to jail, or you can go have an unsanctioned abortion, which then leads to more problems. That's those back alley abortions, using a hanger, becoming sterile, maybe dying, things like that. When you look at how things are supposed to go, you always have to look at the history of a thing, right? So us talking about Roe v. Wade, how it came into fruition, how Casey versus Planned Parenthood and all the other cases that E named, how all of those came into fruition to create the right to abortion. We had to look at the history. Those things came into fruition because prior to them, women were dying. Women were getting infections. Women were sterilizing themselves. Babies were still being born deformed and sick and ill because women tried to have these unsanctioned abortions. You had all of these things. And to think that people being more responsible, as you put it, which I don't think that that's the right term, right? I think that I don't think that that's the right term, because people are responsible and do what they want to do with themselves, and that is their own. That gauge is on them. The level of responsibility is based on their gauge, right? And they stay within that. And I think it's important not to pass judgment on other people for being as sexually free as they are, no matter if it's a man or a woman. You see what I'm saying? And let me finish my point, and then you got it. Okay. So when we're talking about that, and we're talking about what Congress, what the judiciary has said, how Congress has not done diddly squat but sit around and talk about it and be pissed off and do interviews and get on the steps and sing and all of that, when they had fair warning from 2 months ago to get busy with a plan, to get busy with codifying it, to do things to make protections. They could have made those protections and included something for men as it relates to child support, as it relates to all of these things. They could have codified this a while ago. They didn't. Matter of fact, when Obama was president, it was something that he had pledged to codify. It didn't happen, right? It continues to fall to the bottom of the totem pole, just like, and y'all can be mad at me or disagree with me or whatever, but as far as I'm concerned, the way that they allow it to just continue to fall is the same way that they treat Black people in having protections against the police and all of that other stuff. At the end of the day, the way I see it is it's not about babies. It's not about families. It's not about that. It's about money and power, period. Right? There's a clip. I can't remember the woman's name. She goes around, she's a white woman. She teaches about Black history. She puts people in these different scenarios so they can fully understand not even fully, remotely understand what it might feel like to be like a Black person. There's a book. I'm going to find it when one of y'all are talking. I'm going to listen for the name of the book and I'm going to come back.
Let me jump in.
Let me finish what I'm saying and you got it. And one of the things that she said is the attack on Planned Parenthood, right? It's important to watch out for that because it was somebody who used to be an advisor to many of the presidents. He wrote this book. And what he said is the attack on Planned Parenthood is not about protecting babies. It's about protecting the population of Caucasian people. Because once they become that minority, they're afraid of what happens. This is not true for all Caucasian people, right? It's not true in this country, but it is true for many of those with power. And so because they are afraid of what happens once they become the minority, they are afraid that they lose that power. And that's the reason, because white women are not having babies. They're not. And that's the reason why we're here having this discussion. That's the reason why I believe, this is my opinion, why Roe v. Wade has been overturned. And I think that that's the reason why rather than making changes to Roe v. Wade and tweaking it and everything, they just wanted to get rid of it altogether because it shows a way of initiating and stamping, hey, I have that power. Go ahead, Malik.
Yes. So you said a lot there. But as far as, when you're saying I don't care about people, I think a lot of people don't care about themselves or other people, not themselves. They don't care about other people. They want to be able to commit any type of acts and be as selfish as they want to be without suffering the consequences of their selfish acts. So if a person wants that sexual freedom, like you said, they have to deal with the consequences of that. And people are openly saying they don't want to have to deal with that, and they want to be able to make that decision on their own without the other person that they did it with, which is not right, in my opinion. And I mentioned that it's not right that these companies are basically aiding in that freedom, right, without consequence. Like they're essentially like, well, since our state's not going to do it, I just disagree with it, but they can do whatever they want. It's their company. But I disagree with that because, the whole point you made about the sexual freedom is well and good, but people don't want to be accountable for that act. If you do get pregnant, because everybody knows if you have sex, there is a chance you may get pregnant. And everybody wants to point out how the small percentage where contraceptives are not as effective to prevent pregnancy, that 2%, that 1 to 2%, they point that out, but it's very effective, right? If you're a responsible adult and if you want to still have that freedom, you can have sex as much as you want and prevent pregnancy. We have so many options. Like y'all said, we have a lot of medicines, we have a lot of contraceptives and modern technology today. If you don't want to get pregnant, you won't. And you can do that prior to the abortion. Like I was saying, prevention. But
I'm sorry.
Oh, okay. And another thing that you mentioned, I just want to address the cost thing. Yeah, that was kind of the issue in the Roe v. Wade situation. As Ever mentioned, I guess Jane Roe, but we know her real name now. But Jane Roe, um, uh, it was an issue of cost, right? So she couldn't even obtain it illegally. Like she was having issues obtaining abortion that way as well. So, you don't think about the cost when you're doing the consensual act, right? But afterwards, you think about the cost. So I think people need to focus on being more responsible and accountable because having babies are expensive and having abortions are expensive. So maybe you should be more responsible with your decisions.
That's where I wanted to jump in at, because I felt like, I think it's negligent upon us to be able to say to people that, you know what, hey, don't worry about it. Because like we said, generally, the people who have the most kids, you know what I'm saying, are individuals who typically aren't maybe as well off financially. You know what I'm saying? Sometimes we notice that people who have limited, like 1 or 2 kids, they're normally doing kind of well. Whereas like sometimes there's people who may have 4 or 5 kids who aren't necessarily in the best place financially, and that's the argument that I think that I'm going with, and I agree with Malik in saying that, like, we have to look at this and understand that. And this is a little bit off topic in a sense, but there's some people who say if you broke, you shouldn't even date. You feel what I'm saying? So let alone to even get into, having access to sex, but you shouldn't even be able to have access to even courting a woman if you don't have no money. So let alone then you say to themselves like, okay, well, y'all gonna let somebody broke have sex with you and then know that both of y'all don't even have enough to take care of yourself. And then you looking to be able to say, okay, well, whatever, maybe we can go this route or we can go that route. And 9 times out of 10, we know they're not even looking at going through abortions. They're probably just gonna go ahead and keep the baby and just, we're gonna figure it out. We're gonna do what we do. We're gonna make it happen. That's how it works in our community a lot of times. So, I think when we talk about this from a standpoint of, looking at it, and I contrast that with, say, some of the men nowadays. Like, there's a lot of guys that's on a movement that's like, listen, no, I'm not just going to sleep with any old woman. No, I'm not just going to, lay myself and allow myself to have unprotected sex with just anybody. You know what I'm saying? I'm going to pick and choose who I decide to do that and give myself to, which then in turn requires them to have a little bit more self-control, self-discipline on who they allow themselves to have that unprotected sex with. There's some guys that don't care and that's just willing to do whatever and that's slanging it, throwing it, whatever. But then there's other guys that's a little bit more selective. You know what I'm saying? And how they're choosing on who they're willing to give themselves to like that. And I think that with some of these things, unfortunately, this is some of the rulings that may come about. Like, this is some of the thought process that may come about. It sucks that it had to come like this, but I do think that this could be an effect from that, because if you live in a state that's not going to allow for abortions, you're likely going to be able to say to yourself, and you knew that the girl that you might have been dealing with was somebody that, if given a chance, they're trying to make something go for themselves, they're trying to get themselves going, they're likely not going to be willing to want to have a baby while they're, doing what they're doing. They likely would have maybe took that option. But now, if y'all know that that's not on the table for y'all either going to, take some contraceptives or use some other type of ways, or you would choose not to, have it. And I get it. Things happen, stuff slip up, stuff like that happens all the time. But all I'm saying is that if you're not in that position, then people should learn to wait until they get into that spot. I know that's a big ask.
Well, I'm really excited, and it makes me really proud of the both of you all for being virgins up until like right now, where y'all got it. Because obviously, y'all didn't have sex while y'all was broke. So, congratulations.
Right. Like, let me be honest. Like, what y'all are saying sounds ambitious, but it's not realistic. It's not.
Right.
It's not.
Listen.
But
Shantae, hold on for a second. Shantae and I are the same age. Okay. I'll be 41 in a week. All right. And I don't know if the perspective that she and I share has more so to do with the fact that we're women, or more so to do with the fact
our
that we've
age.
been on the planet for 40 years.
It's our age, saying I really think that.
I'm telling y'all right now, what y'all are saying,
y'all ain't talking about nothing. As the old folks say.
Sounds great. Flowers and rainbows and
responsibility, accountability.
No, it's not real. It's not real. It's not gonna happen. It's not gonna happen.
Y'all need to keep it a buck with y'all selves.
It's not gonna happen. Never gonna happen. It didn't happen before Roe v. Wade. It's not gonna happen after.
It ain't finna happen after.
But it do happen though for some segments. I get that it don't happen for the majority.
The other thing is, The other thing is, y'all keep talking about responsible adults. Okay? When the truth of the matter is, there's a whole lot of adults out there that, number one, ain't responsible. And there's a whole lot of young people out there who ain't adults and ain't responsible. And then who's left to raise those babies? They're responsible parents?
Yeah, because these 13-year-olds and whatnot, they can be raised perfectly and still slip up.
Or who? The government? That just brings us right back to square one. Puts us right back to where we were in the 70s. We're relying on public assistance, criminalizing our Black men. Yeah, Black folks are getting hip, right?
Left and
especially
right.
Our Black men. Black men are getting hip. So it's a cycle. You have to remember the history. That's why I keep saying that. It's not realistic to think, oh, well, just use contraceptives or don't have sex or court or whatever until you got the money to take care of a baby. First of all, most Black people don't make enough money to friggin' pay their own rent today. And to sit there and tell Black folks, don't have sex, people that have been having sex for years, yeah, y'all might want to stop because y'all can't afford it now.
I disagree with most Black people don't have the ability to pay their rent. I'm sorry, Sam.
Most Black folks cannot. Most rent is a lot of money. Most people
rent is at an all-time high right now, too.
People are struggling to pay their rent.
You're saying 51% or more Black people can't pay their rent.
We're not about to go there with them statistics. People too busy at work to fill out them surveys. Okay? They're too busy at work to fill out them surveys. Their numbers don't count.
Okay? Oh my God, today.
You're saying statistics and data by Black people for Black people.
Yes, it's not right because the people they're counting people who filled out the survey. They're not counting the people they're not counting the people who ain't got time.
Where are you getting that information from?
Most people don't fill out surveys. Look, I was a criminal justice major.
No, I'm saying you're saying most Black people can't afford their rent and stuff. You can't say a statement like that.
Why can't I?
Right. Well, you said people are sexually irresponsible.
Hold on, we did a whole podcast on how rent is at an all-time high all over the country.
That's true, right? But most
rent is at an all-time high. And the demographic that is having the biggest problem with paying it is African American community.
Exactly.
Our poverty rate even at 51%. So don't say that.
It doesn't matter what the poverty rate is because people, look. If I
don't misconstrue the two.
Right. If I'm working, if I work 3 minimum wage jobs to pay rent, that is struggling to pay rent. That is having a hard time paying rent. Period. People should not have to work 3 and 4 jobs to pay one. Listen, people should not have to work 3 and 4 jobs to pay one bill. One bill. And that's what's happening today. We did a whole podcast just a couple of weeks ago about how in New York, they want you to make 6 figures to rent an apartment in Manhattan. To rent, not buy, rent. People are struggling. So like I was saying, It is a struggle. People are out here struggling to pay their bills, to pay their rent. It is unrealistic to tell people, many of which who use sex as a vice for stress. Don't do that. That's irresponsible, because how you going to pay for a baby? It's not going to happen. It might sound good, it might be ambitious, but it is not realistic. It's not. You see what I'm saying? That's why Shantae made the comment about it's nice to know that y'all was virgins until y'all wasn't broke. You know, she's joking, but that's what it sounds like. And it's not realistic. And to be completely honest, what needs to happen is our government needs to do something. Since they want to be all up in our mix, they need to do something to balance it out, because this is not a balance. Telling people what they should and should not do with their bodies, forcing people to have kids, no matter if it's a man or a woman, right? Despite of whether, regardless of whether or not they're quote unquote responsible or not, if you're gonna be all up in everybody's business, make it right. Don't be all up in other people's business telling them what to do. Make it so that people can make choices. That's the thing about America. America is supposed
I was just about to say that.
The free, right?
Yeah.
We're supposed to have freedom of choice. Even in the Bible, we have freedom of choice. You see what I'm saying? Even in the Bible, we have freedom of choice. It doesn't mean that it doesn't come without consequence, but we should absolutely be able to have a safe choice. A safe choice. Right. And so our Congress isn't doing nothing yet. I don't know if they will. I don't know what the heck they're waiting for. I don't know what the president's waiting for. I don't want to hear no more speeches. You know, we keep seeing, now we're out here seeing people out there protesting. Police are back at it, beating up women who are out there peacefully protesting. You know what I mean? It's just a vicious cycle. Like, stop attacking people. Just figure out what we can do so we can live together. You know what I mean? And then that's no matter if you're Black, white, Hispanic, Asian, whatever, man, female, gay, straight, we are all sharing this world together. And we need to be able to find a way to do that in a way that's not dangerous to one another. You know, and I think that that's the bottom line. You know, that's my final thought. I think that we need to come up with realistic measures, right? Something that's realistic, not, you know, stuff that's just never going to happen. You can't even get people to, not for nothing, everybody keeps seeing it on the internet, and it's the truth. Women's bodies today, on June 26, 2022, are more regulated than guns in this country. That's a problem. I said that. That is a problem. It's a huge problem. More than an inanimate object. That is a huge issue. And it just shows our division, our weaknesses, and everything else. And I'm pretty sure the rest of the world is looking at us once again like, here goes dumbass America making dumbass decisions. And so I think that we have to do better. So that's my final thought. I don't know if you guys want to go ahead and give your final thought. Otherwise,
I'll jump in real fast. I think my final thought is again, you can't look at the government to save you on any decisions that you're making in your personal life. You can't look to nobody else. You need to look at the partner that you're dealing with, and then you and them need to be able to assess yourselves to see if y'all doing the right things. As long as there's contraceptives around, that you guys should be more responsible in how y'all moving. If you're not really in a space that you need to be in order to, you know, bring that forward. I think this also leaves room for people to work on having planned pregnancies, you know, maybe where you can go to the doctor if you have the ability to. Again, if you don't, because I understand that, like, poverty is a generational thing. Like, I understand that everybody doesn't necessarily know how to do things the right way. So my argument would be then that, you know what I'm saying, that people maybe look to find mentors within their communities, look to try to find people that's in there. And for people who do have some education, that do have some understanding, give back to their community so that they can try to teach people how to move in a way in which they can go ahead and make themselves more effective. But more importantly, at the bare minimum, if you know how to have sex, you know about a plan B, you know about a condom. point blank period. We're not gonna sit here and play the game like we don't know these. You know that they sell them at the gas station for a single pack. You know you can get a whole pack. You know that you can even go to Planned Parenthood and get them for free. They give them away on college campuses. And not to say that everybody goes to college, but it's just a simple fact of the matter that you can go on Planned Parenthood, which is in a lot of neighborhoods. You can go in there and get it. You can get tested for things, just like you get tested for STDs and other things. You can get tested to see, you know, is there any issues that you may have prior to having a pregnancy, so that you can understand if that's even something that's for you or not. So that's my last little summation, is that we need to be a little bit more selective in the way that we're moving in that regards, especially if you plan on having a life for yourself. I'm just speaking to young men because, again, you ain't got no right in this thing one way or another, because once you conceive, it's over for you, buddy. She got all the decisions.
For women now too.
I mean, yeah, women can have that mindset as well. They definitely should. And it's even more important on a woman, because at least if you're dealing with a dude who got themselves in a little position, you can get your child support. You can at least make sure that you have some type of funding. But I mean, I was just speaking on the brother's side. You know?
Well, yeah, I guess I'm gonna piggyback a little bit off of you, E. I was gonna say, as far as realistic solutions, I don't think it's unrealistic to ask competent adults to be disciplined, to take accountability for their decisions, and be responsible. I don't think that's unrealistic at all, because you have to do it when you're driving a car. You got to do it when you're operating a firearm. You got to do it in other areas of your life. So I don't see why, when it comes to the sexual experience, which leads to the result of getting pregnant, which we're talking about today, the topic of abortions, is that goes out the window all of a sudden. So I think competency needs to be a focus here, and stress like, hey, you're a competent adult, you're responsible, and you're disciplined, so act like one. So I think that's what's going to be stressed here. Obviously, you know, when it comes to abortions, there's still options on the table. You just have to think more, right? You have to move differently, or you're going to have to just deal with the consequences of your actions. You know, there's still options out there for the preservation of the life of the pregnant woman, or even some states have the rape exception, which I think they need to add on, right? So they need to add on the rape exception to all these states, especially the 13 states where it kicked in automatically, and then the ones that will kick in 30 days after the ruling on June 24th. So I think that's a solution that needs to be added. I'm with that. So those that's all my thoughts on it. As far as solution goes. Shantae, any last words?
I guess we're equating competent adult with perfect adult that doesn't make mistakes.
Oh,
so
with me.
No, competent adult. There's a whole new definition behind competency now, and it's okay. Get it. Competency means an irreputable person who is not allowed to make any mistakes. And if that person makes mistakes, then they're not considered a competent adult anymore. But that's fine. My last statements are Roe v. Wade overturning saddened me to the core, not because of the readily apparent problems, but the things that are going to happen, that elusive trickle-down effect, because it hurts Black people the most.
Black women.
Or Black women, if I'm being to be even more specific. This is a Black woman. This is an attack to the Black community by way of the woman. They already get y'all through the police. How can we get the Black woman now? So I think my words are to see past. Y'all, let's try to see past our opinions and look at the big picture. And in the big picture, I think some of us may have touched on it, but I don't even think we all have it all together. It's bigger than this. It's bigger than this conversation. And we all need to stay vigilant on this topic.
Agreed. Sam, did you have our
Yeah, so the reason why I muted real quick is because I was trying to get the name of that book that I was referring to earlier. It's called The Girth, or The Birth Girth by Ben Wattenberg. Y'all make sure y'all check it out. That is not the book of the month. That's the book I was referring to as far as the attack on Planned Parenthood and all that other stuff. So y'all check that out. The book of the month, though, excuse me, is actually Seize the Time. That book is a story of the Black Panther Party and Huey P. Newton, and it was written by one of the co-founders of the Black Panther Party, Bobby Seale. So y'all make sure y'all check that out. Also, too, our Black Business of the Month. Again, I'll just give a little bit of background while I pull it up. I went to undergrad with a gentleman named David Mack, and he does marketing. He teaches people how to market their businesses. And his mantra is that your marketing should visually touch people. So make sure you check him out. He's on Instagram. He has a website. His website is down right now, but he is on Instagram at Mac, M-A-C-K _the_marketer. So you make sure y'all reach out to him. He can help you out with all your business marketing needs. That is our Black Business of the Month. And lastly, the motivational minute. There's two quotes that I have. One is from Michelle Obama. Excuse me, because it's a little small. And y'all see I got my glasses on today. It says, "You may not always have a comfortable life, and you will not always be able to solve all of the world's problems all at once. But don't ever estimate the impact that you have, because history has shown us that courage can be contagious, and hope can take on a life form of its own." That was by Michelle Obama. And there's another quote, I'm not sure who said it, but it says, "The only time a woman is helpless is when her nail polish is drying." So the reason why I said that is because I know in times like this, for many women, we feel hopeless, right? We feel hopeless because we feel as though the government is telling us what we can and cannot do with our bodies. And that right there is a tough pill to swallow. It's incredibly frustrating, especially too when you are trying to express what that feels like, and people of the opposite sex who don't necessarily understand what that feels like don't understand. Doesn't mean that they don't care, but they don't understand. Some don't care. Most probably do, but they don't understand because they haven't walked a day in your shoes. So, with that being said, I know that June 24th was a very difficult day for women around this country, and that's women of all colors, right? But we have to be hopeful, and we have to be vigilant. We have to be smart, and we have to be safe, right? Safe and try to do what's right so that we can go ahead and continue to push forward as far as keeping ourselves protected. And for those those men that ally with us, thank you. That's first and foremost, thank you, because it helps us to feel supported and protected in certain ways. And we do appreciate that. And so we all just have to remain hopeful that at some point our government will figure it out, even though it doesn't look like it, even though it seems completely hopeless. We do have to, because the world doesn't stop turning because we got issues, right? So be kind to each other. Everybody, make sure you remember that you don't know what the person next to you is going through. So also love on each other and be kind. That concludes our podcast for today. Our socials will be posted up at the very end, along with the book of the month and with the Black Business of the Month. Shantae, did you want to provide your socials so people can come follow you?
Sure. It is at ESSELLE, the JD. That is my Instagram handle. And it's just Shantae Tidwell on Facebook, I think.
Okay.
And I think it's Claire Huxtable on Twitter.
Okay. Well, y'all make sure y'all go ahead and follow her. And you guys can also follow us. Like I said, our socials are on there. Like, share, subscribe, tell a friend, and make sure you check us out on Wednesday at 8:30-ish on Instagram Live. That being said, it was a long conversation, but it was a good and robust one. So thank y'all. And thank you again, Shantae, for joining us.
Thank you all for having me.
Y'all later.
Peace. Peace out, everybody.